But of course, as I'm sure you're implying, the media are deeply bound up with money and business. We only have to think of Rupert Murdoch, for example, right? Or the fact that we have basically, in the English-speaking world, essentially about 5 or 6 major global corporations, tremendous power. So, well, we need to see where these different sections of the community, where they are. Right? Steiner's, one of the key thoughts to grasp when we think about threefolding is that in the 19th century, due to the influence of Darwinism, remember what I was saying about gradually, particularly intellectual people, educated people, they began to fall away from traditional religion. They began to think that religion was something for children, or something from a previous age which we'd grown out of. So science, natural science, should be the guiding principles of society, they would say. And what stands there as the guiding principles of natural science? Well, in England in the 19th century it was Charles Darwin. So we saw how Darwinism, as applied to the animal realm, then is gradually, it falls into being applied to the social realm. So you get social Darwinism. And today we even have further development of this in the various evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, evolutionary sociology, and so on. Yeah? And there, in this, you have the thought that, well, human beings are basically animals, and we need to base our economic and social practice on the natural world, the world of the animals. Now, recently, relatively recently, naturalists have been pointing out that principles of cooperation also exist within the animal world, but quite clearly it's obvious that the animal world also operates on fear and violence and eating each other. Yes? You only have to look at the birds in your garden to see how, they've got to be careful of other animals, they've got to be careful of the cat and so on and so forth. Yes? Well, remember what I said about companies. A big company will gobble up a small company, even if the small company doesn't want to be gobbled up. Hostile takeover. Okay? So this principle of basing our human practice on animal practice, Steiner was pointing out, this is totally wrong for a healthy human society. So how should we base our social practice on? And it should actually be on something which is profoundly human. Namely, the human organism. So in 1917, he first brought forward the idea of the threefold structure of the human organism and looked at the 3 systems of the human organism. The nervous system, focused in the brain, the circulatory system, focused in the heart and lungs, and the metabolic system, focused in the guts, the intestines and the organs down here, and the generative organs. So we've all got that. Belongs to all of us. And these 3 systems are all separate, obviously. Yeah? Your metabolism is down here, it's not up here. Although there is a part of metabolism in your head, isn't there? Where is it? Exactly, your mouth. Here. This is related to what goes on down here, isn't it? This is not related to what goes on down here, at least not directly. These are not related to what goes on down here, at least not directly. So you've got, this is a microcosm in a sense, of the rest of the organism. The organism grows out of the head in babyhood, as it were, or infancy, in the fetal stages and so on. And these 3 systems have to be separate, but they're also interrelated, aren't they? The nervous system obviously permeates the whole body, but it's nevertheless centered in the head. Unless, of course, you play football, and then you put your brains in your boots. Or you use your head as a limb to head the ball. Right? Strange, isn't it? Very English. You use your head as a limb, and you put your brains in the boots, and your feet become clever to hit the ball. But actually, the human head is not really supposed to be used as a limb. It's for something else. It has its own function. I'd just like to perhaps introduce it's a little bit long, but I'd like to introduce a very interesting quote from Steiner, which shows you something about, if I can, yeah. Okay. I lost it. Here it is. So 9th July 1918, Steiner gave a lecture. It was called East and West. And in his lecture he said the following. Certain Anglo-American circles have organized this into a science. They cultivate especially the powers of perception belonging to the body, which strengthen the subjection of man to the body. Various practices are intended to bring home vividly to the man of this people, the Anglo-American peoples, that his body belongs to the earth. He is to feel not only I am my arm, my leg, but I am also the force of gravity passing through my limbs. I am the weight which encumbers my hand or arm. A strong physical sense of relationship between the human body and the earthly elements is to be acquired. This strong feeling of relationship between the creature and the physical body and the earth exists today in certain species of apes, which have it as their soul life, their feeling life. In them, it can be studied physiologically and zoologically. What's present there can gradually be formed into a system of instruction for human beings. All that has to be done is to develop the coarse side of relationship with nature into a system of bodily education. In saying this, I am neither railing nor criticising, I'm merely stating facts. Thus, it will be possible to bring about a sort of practical Darwinism, intensifying the relation of man to what binds him to the earth in a certain sense, to monkeyfy him. That is the practical side. It will be pursued through the intensive cultivation, ostensibly instinctive, but in fact carefully directed, of sports and such like things. This fetters the soul, drawing it into a sense of kinship with the earthly, with the earth itself. And so an ideal such as I've described is set up. By this means, the continuing alternation of spiritual life and physical life will be overcome. And by degrees, the ideal will be realized of living in future periods of earth evolution as a kind of phantom, of dwelling on earth in this guise. The very interesting point is that this ideal can be appropriately followed only by the male population, and hence, in spite of all political endeavours, an increasing difference between men and women will arise in Anglo-American civilization. Political endeavours certainly seem to be aimed in the opposite direction, he says, but in the inner depths of their being, men often want something quite different from what they are pursuing by political means. Anglo-American spiritual life will in essence descend to future ages through woman, while that which lives in male bodies will strive towards such as an ideal as I have described, the monkeyfying ideal. This will set the pattern of the future Anglo-American peoples. And you might think that's a bit drastic, yeah? But in fact, when I arrived in Ireland, I came into the place where you have to show your passport. And what greeted me as soon as I arrived in Ireland was 6 gigantic posters of the movie Man of Steel. You've probably seen some, yes? Superman, and it's a Superman movie, right? And you look at those forms and you see what kind of image is being presented to that, yeah? The incredible, hard, physical force of that. And we see this growing and developing through our culture. You only got to think of the development of rock music from the 60s, when, Black Sabbath was thought of as a horrendous band. Now they look like a kind of fairy tale compared to the darkest elements of death and satanic metal, for example. So one gets more and more and more and more into this hardening element. This is in a sense what he's pointing to, that the male element sinks further and further and further down into this materialistic thinking. So the fact that we have in our culture today, like we had in England in the Olympics, this image of sport, and I fully realise that one can talk about sport in terms of what it brings young people together and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's true, but people can be brought together in many other ways too, yes. However, what is the essence of what's going on there? Where are people's intentions really being drawn to in the worship of sport to the degree that we have it today? Which is far more than it was in Steiner's time.
It's a religion.
It's become a religion, exactly. Yeah. It's become a philosophy, a religion, a tribalism, a way of belonging. Yeah? A substitute religion in many ways, yes. But that religion is, what does the word religion mean? Reconnecting, right? Religere, right? So what are you reconnecting with? Yeah? That's the question we need to ask. We're not reconnecting with the invisible. We're reconnecting with the muscles, with the ligaments, with all the physical parts of the human organism. Yes? So that's where our attention is focused on. And particularly with the males. Obviously one can see how the women too, women are also starting to get like this these days, yeah? To compete in sport. But in that sense we could say that women are increasingly being drawn in that direction as well. And that, I think, is a particular feature in the West. So, when we look at Europe, we think about Europe in the 21st century, I think we basically see ourselves in this situation. I've deliberately put Europe there squeezed between these big powers of the United States on the left and China here on the right, and I've deliberately chosen these images of one, well, actually a woman, but does she look like a woman? Yeah, pretty forbidding face, isn't it? It's actually, originally of course, it's the face of a Near Eastern goddess with these rigid 7 points proceeding from the head. One figure, supposedly liberty, supposedly, and with a book of principles, which says 1776, the law, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. Whereas over here in China, the symbol of the dragon, the natural world, but also that which links the spiritual world and the natural world, the dragon. The dragon, of course, in China being very different from the Western dragon. It's, first of all, vertical, not horizontal. And it's a beautiful beast. It doesn't live underground and hoards minerals. It lives in the air and the sea and the clouds. It's an elemental being, Chinese dragon. And you see here that it's being carried around by the collective, by the people, by the group. And here is the leader of the group. He's organizing those who are carrying it. And this is the ancient Oriental picture of, for example, the Emperor of China. The one leader of the group, of the tribe, of the clan. Yeah? Whereas here, I, liberty, is that principle again, liberty. And here we, in Europe, are sort of squeezed. Yeah? So I'm coming now to our present situation. I'd just like to draw your attention to this state of Europe in 1789. And I'm afraid Ireland was not independent, of course, part of the British Empire. But I'd just like to draw your attention to the different gestures, because this, how Europe was on the eve of the French Revolution, shows us, I think, something profound about the nature, the true nature of the continent to which we all belong. Look at the west of Europe there. The British Isles, France, Spain, Portugal. What do you see? What kind of shapes do you see? Could you perhaps call out a few words? How does it look? What comes to mind?
It's all big pieces rather than small pieces.
Right? So we've got a few large unitary.
They're kind of square, aren't they? They're kind of square and rectangular.
Oh, that's interesting, eh? They're kind of square and rectangular. Indeed, they are. And of course, the whole European continent sort of goes this way, doesn't it? And if you extend outwards and go all the way to the Bering Strait in Siberia, then we see that the whole of Eurasia is actually expansive in the east and proceeds down to Iberia, contracts, right? So even Eurasia as a whole, and Europe in particular, has this gesture, doesn't it? Expansive in the east to contraction in the west. Solid unitary states, each one has a strong capital city with tight, disciplined, efficient, relatively, administration to control that country. Yeah? Of course, you might say, what about France 1789? That wasn't very disciplined, was it? Well, no. But once the revolutionaries took over, they were pretty ruthless. And they extended their control not only over France, but then over Europe. And then Napoleon did the same thing. So, these are efficient, tightly controlled states. This is the gesture in the West. How about the East? This, of course, is Russia. What's this? Where's this?
Ukraine, Poland.
Right, this is Poland, Lithuania, as it was, yeah? Poland, yeah? Before it disappeared, soon after. And this? What's that orange base there? Austria. It was not yet Austria-Hungary. That came in 1867. The Austrian Empire, ruled by one family. Just like the House of Saud, we have a country which is controlled by a family, Saudi Arabia. This was an empire ruled by a family, the Habsburg Empire, the Austrian Empire. And this? Yeah, the Turkish, the Ottoman Empire, right? So obviously what you see there, what do they have in common, these realms?
They're huge.
Yeah, they are huge, they are expansive, their rulers ruled them with difficulty. They were not efficient, they were not tightly disciplined. It was hard to retain control of these areas. Yeah? So you see this expansive gesture there. So the gesture here in the East, we could say, the physical gesture of the states, is this. I would show it like that. Yeah? So you've got this gesture in the West, you've got this gesture in the East. Now, what about this here in the middle? How would you describe that?
Split.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, you see? Split. But you're Irish. You are Irish, I presume.
Well, Brendan Behan says everything starts with the split. You know, politics, whatever. So he says, first of all, there's a party, and then there is the split.
I can understand that, but if things are going to split into two, everything must surely start with a whole, mustn't it? For it to split.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
But are you Irish?
Yes, I am.
Right.
Yes.
So it's interesting that as a Western person, you look at that and you say split. I asked the same question to another audience, and the first answer that came was broken. Somebody else said fragmented. Somebody else said divided. Well, yeah, you can understand that, right? From our Western perspective, because this is our Western perspective in Spain. You from Spain?
Yeah.
From Spain, from France, from Britain, yeah? We have unity.
Well, it's actually an Irish perspective there, traditionally.
Yeah, of course.
That's what Ireland would look like.
Of course. But you know, Ireland at that time was under the control of
I know, but before that.
Yeah. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that when Westerners, Europeans, look at this, we see split, right? But there's another way of looking at it. And that was that this system in Germany, 360 states then, 360 now, this goes right back to the Middle Ages when a particular German emperor, Holy Roman Emperor in 1356, laid down a golden bull, which was a kind of a proclamation, which laid down that the constitution of Germany would be elective, not genetic. So there would be 7 electoral princes who would choose the emperor. There wouldn't be the son of, the son of, the son of. Yeah? They would choose. And also, that meant in time that Germany and Central Europe would not be like this, and would not be like this. And it ended up being multiple like that, right? And these bad borders were constantly shifting over the centuries. So you had something here which was mobile in the middle. Mobile. That's another way of looking at it, you see. Mercurial, mobile. And that doesn't sound quite so bad, does it? As split, fragmented, divided, broken. Yeah? So here we've got this gesture. I'm not being pejorative, don't misunderstand me, yeah? It's simply as it is, yeah? It's solid, it's together, it's united, it's contracted. And here you've got this gesture, and then in the middle you've got this kind of balancing gesture. And so we can see from 100 years before this picture. And I would say this is the symbolic language of the 17th century, which comes out of the sort of the mood of what was called the Rosicrucian movement in the early 17th century, where people tried to understand principles of wisdom through symbolic pictures. We see this picture, which really expresses, in another sense, that. I wonder if you see what I'm getting at. If you look at him, you see the hand behind the back, it's a fist. You see the snake which crawls along the ground on the sword. And if you look at him, you see the hand above the head, and the hand is open. And he's got a bird on his sword. Flight. We see the colours, the sun and the moon. I won't say anything more about that now, but just drawing attention to the fallen wing on the ground, where wings are not supposed to be. And the wing touches the leg of each. But his wings, or his, if you like, are very small, as if to say, well, I've only just kind of grown them, they're still growing. Small wings. And, of course, it's a picture of complete balance, isn't it? And he's holding these two, well, you probably recognise that, yeah? You recognise that symbol?
Mercury.
Mm-hmm. There's Mercury, symbol of Mercury. And the Mercury, in the symbolic language of that, was the principle between sulfur, hot, and salt, cold. Between the expansive and the contractive. And Mercury, or Quicksilver, is the balancing middle. The mercurial middle. Obviously all three are necessary.
And between the sun and the moon.
And between the sun and the moon as well, yeah. Mm-hmm. An interesting picture, I think, yeah. We could probably say a lot more about it. But I just chose that to show you that in the European psychological consciousness from ancient times, there has been this picture. And you as Irish people, or some of you as Irish people, will know much better than me how deeply a threefold picture is rooted in your mythology and your culture in this particular country, more so than in mine, in fact. But more or less, this threefold balance, contraction, expansion, and the balancing middle, has been there in our European culture, and we see it portrayed in 1789. However, what happened after that? What did Napoleon try to do? He tried to unify, that's right. Let me go somewhere else here at this point. Napoleon, this is what Napoleon did. So this is the Napoleon's Europe. France spreads out, Spain is taken in, Germany is taken in, Italy is conquered, Poland, the Austrian Empire, Prussia become puppet states in effect. So one pattern, one code of law for all of Europe. One language. In those days the aristocracy spoke French all over, yeah, in educated classes. So you've got this principle of oneness, which negates, in a certain sense, the natural threefoldness of Europe.
The funny thing is, Steiner said, if I was going to be another person, I'd be Napoleon.
You sure about
He
that?
said that, definitely.
Ooh.
Yeah. That
As
was
the Scots would say, a him of dudes about that. But let's talk about that a little later. Yeah? I don't think so.
I'm sure
Positive. It's a good joke. But the point
That's
is,
why you haven't got sure.
I really can't imagine that Rudolf Steiner would have said, I want to impose one pattern on the whole of Europe. That's what Woodrow Wilson did when he came in 1919 after the First World War and started drawing lines all over the continent. Yeah? So anyway, that's what happens to France, this oneness under Napoleon. And then we see how later on in the 19th century, Prussia develops in Germany, and we get, eventually, of course, that leads to, eventually to Hitler. So you get another effort to control the whole of Europe and force one pattern on Europe. So here's Napoleon, you see, looking like a Roman emperor. Rome was in style at the time. And Hitler, who himself said, the fascist movement is a spontaneous return to the traditions of ancient Rome. You have these two examples of something bubbling up from Europe's past, which doesn't really belong in the present, and an attempt to impose this ancient one-patternism upon the cultures of the continent. Many people would say this is going on again today. And I don't have too much time to go into that, but let me just show you a couple of things. For example, this is the signing of the European Constitution in the year 2004. So there, in the heart of ancient Rome, on the Capitoline Hill, here's Tony Blair and Jack Straw, Britain's foreign minister at the time, signing the European Constitution, EU Constitution. Yeah? And I don't suppose you recognise who that is, do you? Well, who do you think it is? Does it look like? Some Pope, right? Some Pope, yeah. Well, which Pope? Yeah? It's very interesting. It is Pope Innocent X. What did Pope Innocent X do? He was the Pope during the 30 Years' War, when after fighting for 30 years, the Europeans, Catholics and Protestants, were so exhausted, they both said, enough, enough, let's stop fighting. And Pope Innocent X said, no, go on. He wanted the fighting to continue. Pope Innocent X. There he is.
Was he Francis Bacon's screaming pope? I think he was. Because he was such a powerful figure.
No, sorry.
He wasn't innocent.
It's a nice one. He was after Francis Bacon. Bacon died in the 1620s.
No.
Oh, Francis Bacon.
The artist.
The artist, all right. The artist.
I think it was Innocent X because he was so powerful, and then he
Possibly.
portrayed
I don't know
him as
enough
a
about the
yes,
art of Francis Bacon. And you see him there blessing, as it were, the politicians, yes? And they both went up there, 2 by 2, and signed the document. And then the people of France and the Netherlands, if you remember, in the following year said, excuse me, we object. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And the European Constitution was suddenly sort of put back on hold, right? But then came the Treaty of Nice, so it came back in again. And then the people of Ireland said, excuse me, we object. You remember what happened after that? Yeah? I'm sure you do. And then came the Treaty of Lisbon, right? So it came in through the back door. And let me just, if I can find it, show you what happened in that case. Oh no, it's here. This is from Germany's Der Spiegel magazine, 1999. Der Spiegel is the biggest selling magazine in Europe, and they noted that the Minister-President of Luxembourg, Jean-Claude Juncker, had declared to his colleagues in the EU as follows, 1999, so that's the year, that's when the euro came in. Yes? We decide something, we put it out there in public, and then we wait a while to see what happens. If there is no great outcry and no opposition, because most people have no idea what has been decided, then we go on, step by step, until there is no going back. So So now we understand what they're about, yeah? But most people are too busy watching the Olympics and zap, 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 zap on TV and so to pay attention to this. Yeah? So this is what's going on. Before the break, I'll just show you something that shows how deep this particular rabbit hole goes. Just a moment, bear with me. 1947, Winston Churchill. He gave 3 famous speeches about European unity, in which he believed. So here we have Winston Churchill, the Albert Hall, 14th May 1947, London. He said, "We do not, of course, pretend that united Europe provides the final and complete solution to all the problems of international relationships. The creation of an authoritative, all-powerful world order is the ultimate aim towards which we must strive. Unless some effective world supergovernment can be set up and brought quickly into action, the prospects of peace and human progress are dark and doubtful. But let there be no mistake upon the main issue. Without a united Europe, there is no sure prospect of world government. It is the urgent and indispensable step towards the realization of that ideal." So the united Europe, ladies and gentlemen, already for people like Churchill and the British elite, and the American elite, by the way, of that time, was the indispensable step on the road to world government. That's 1947. 3 years later, you had the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community, and then every 5 or 6 years after that, you had the next step on the way towards the creation of what we have today. The European Union, with its flag and its president and its song and its, to the point where we've got, in effect, de facto, the United States of Europe. Yeah? And what happened just a couple of weeks ago, after the Bilderberg meeting in Britain, interestingly enough, do you remember, did you notice on the news about the transatlantic free trade area between the United States and the European Union? Yeah, you noticed that? The politicians are getting together to discuss how to create a transatlantic free trade area. Well, how did the European Union first come about? Free trade area. Right. And if you look into this, you'll find that this transatlantic union has been the goal, as it were, from way back when. That is, in the 1950s and the 1940s. And even before that, you can trace it right back to the statements by the British elite, people in the British elite, in the 100 years ago, before the First World War. Yeah? That when the British Empire felt that we, the British Empire, are getting weaker and weaker, and the only way we can survive in the world against the Russians and against the Germans is by borrowing the muscle of the Americans. So we have to connect with American muscle. These two, Europe, Britain first of all, and then America, together against Germany and Russia. And then after World War II, it became Europe and America must get together against Russia. And today, it is we too, Europe and America, must get together against China. So instead of a threefoldness of Asia, Europe and America, we are being forced into a twofoldness of West and East, just like we had in the 20th century, which was so damaging after World War II. So this is another aspect of the threefold thought, because the way this is happening, it's happening because of the nature of politics and economics in particular, which we have in the West and have had since the 18th century. As I've said, in economics, which is based on the wrong principle, on liberty instead of cooperation, instead of fraternity. So Steiner's point was, we need to see that it's not enough to talk about, in the abstract, liberty, equality, fraternity. But today we've got to realise that we need liberty in the cultural realm, where workers in the cultural realm, artists, scientists, teachers, have to be free to unfold their individual talents. We need equality in the political realm, the realm of rights and responsibilities, and we need fraternity in the economic realm, the realm of business. And I'm not under any illusions that this is going to happen overnight, but we've got to start changing our thinking, because at the moment we're just keeping our fingers crossed that we can get through this crisis, and then we can return to where we were before the crisis, and then just carry on as normal. But that won't happen, because these wrong principles will just generate worse crises, and they will just keep on recurring. I think I'll stop there, because that's about time for a break and give you a breather, and then we can carry on afterwards, yeah?